Let's do some drywall.
Hey everybody, Drywall Repairman here. We're just going to do another simple video. This is a patch repair on a wall. A mistake happened here, so we're just going to go ahead and get this patched up. This receptacle comes into play, so we might have to put a piece of wood here, make sure this stays tight because it's a remodel can. A remodel can is put in after the fact where they use these tabs and they use a screw to tighten up these tabs. First things first, this is going to be a spray texture. This looks like a splatter or heavy orange peel. So your first step you want to do with any repair like this is go ahead and plastic off the area. We're going to go ahead and plastic off the floor, wrap plastic around the cabinet all the way around, basically to contain the overspray from the texture, because when I do spray it, we spray it at a high PSI, so we basically have to contain the area like we're going to be painting, but instead of painting we're doing a spray texture. Plus plastic keeps all the debris, catch all the demo and stuff. There's always going to be a mess involved. But first things first, let's get this area masked off. I use a roll of plastic. I use an 1.5 inch tape, whatever you have, paper, plastic, tarp, newspaper, whatever you have. Just go ahead and your first steps just to get the area masked off. So let's go ahead and get this masked off. Once we get it masked off, we're going to go ahead and square up the area. Since it's a round hole, we're going to square it up nice and square. Try to get some framing. It looks like there's framing on the side here, so there's a 2x4 stud here, so I'm probably going to cut center of the stud here. There's no stud to the right, so more likely I'm just going to cut it right here, and I might try to run a piece of wood here if possible, or the top and bottom. You always need backing or wood on at least both sides of the patch. Both sides of the patch, top and bottom, is the ideal strong patch. That way you can get screws in the old sheetrock and in the new sheetrock. So it's a nice tight patch, so that way you don't get any cracks, stress cracks later. You don't want to do all this work and then it cracks out because you didn't put enough wood backing in, or you didn't put the screws in the existing sheetrock to tighten it up. But now, flapping the jaws here, let's get to work. We got to work with our hands, not with our mouth. So let's get to work, get this area. Piece of plastic, use tape. Some guys like to use blue tape, whatever masking tape you have works good. Just basically mask off anything you don't want mud to get on. It's the same prep process like if you're going to be painting, spray painting, stuff like that, because we are doing a spray texture. Mask around the cabinets. Nice clean masking job. Sometimes this prep work takes more time than the actual job repair. Baseboard area, the floor. Receptacles, I like to just tape these off. I don't like to get any mud in there. It's easier to just do everything now before you start getting your hands covered in mud. Towel bar like this, if you're able to take them off, ideally. If not, just mask around everything. This is in a bathroom, so they fell into the wall on accident, so it doesn't take much to break a wall. Sheetrock is only 1/2 inch thick, and if you hit the center of the studs, it's the weakest point, especially in the middle of the wall, because it's where the two sheets meet, so it's the weakest point of the wall. Kick that up, get it out of the way. Alright, once you get it masked off, my technique I like to do for mask off, unroll my plastic, and I just like to tack the tape that I put up and just tack it up. Whatever masking technique you use will work. You just want to get this area all masked off. If you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of plastic and stuff, I've seen people use old newspaper, old sheets, tarps, whatever you have will work. Some people like to just do the repair, then they'll mask off before they do the texture, but for me it's just easier to do it first step whenever the wall calls for spray texture. Also, you don't want loose plastic, because when you start spraying the texture, you don't want your loose plastic to fall in your textured wall. So make sure everything's tacked down nice and tight, no loose flapping plastic. The floor is nice and sealed. Alright, everything's sealed up, looks good. Around the boxes. Alright, masking tape went the distance. Basic cleaning tools, of course you're going to need a screw gun, razor blade, cutting sheetrock, screws. This is 1/2 inch sheetrock, so we use 1 1/4 1.5 inch coarse drywall screws are what we use for 1/2 inch sheetrock, fiberglass mesh tape, sheetrock, stuff like that. We're going to be cutting halfway on the stud here. They call it center of the stud, so you can use a T-square level, or you could just measure it. This is my center of my stud right here, so I can measure it over since I buy the thing, and it's going to be, it just says 3 3/4, so I can just mark the top up here. 3 3/4, 3 3/4, 3 3/4. This makes it easier. If you have a piece of wood, you can just mark it. Smaller pieces of wood, you can just pencil it down, pencil it down, pencil it down. Easy enough. You want to check how high this goes. It just goes right to the edge, so I'm just going to go run it across for my line, pencil it across, pencil it across. I'm going to go right down to the edge of the box here. Same thing here. I'm going to go down, down, and then this dip, you check the back because it goes down like that, so you make sure you go past the damaged area. Run it across, run it across. Now you have a nice square area. Of course it's not perfect. If you want to make it perfect, then you would just measure it over before you pencil it. So 10 inches. This side over here is higher, so you can always, if you want it perfectly square, always measure it out. No big deal. That's 10, 10. So at the bottom, just kick it over. No big deal. You go off course. Cutout tools, of course you can use a keyhole saw. This one's a little more rough, or just a razor blade. I like to just use a razor blade on these small cutouts. So you basically follow your pencil line. You're going to, of course, score it. Since this is a framing right here, I'm going to have to score it pretty deep 3 times. Get really deep because we're cutting right on the stud. Cutting right on the stud. I'm scoring this. I'm trying to go all the way through, so I'm hitting the stud now. Then it should just come right off. Look at that. Go across. This is a simple step you can do if you're not comfortable doing the drywall repair, total repair yourself. You can at least get the area squared up. This could save you some money if you do call a drywaller or someone to come repair it. At least it's nice and square. Same thing on the bottom. You're just scoring. Also, you can keep a piece of the drywall for a paint match. You can take that to any paint store and they can paint match it pretty close to the paint. So always keep a cutout if you do need a paint match. Remember that box? I'm going to have to put a piece of wood in here to try to tighten up this loose remodel box. They call it retro box. Any sides that are rigid, rugged, you just take it with a razor blade, clean it up. If you have a rasp, some guys like to even use a rasp to really clean up edges. Not necessary, it's just a patch. This just makes a nice clean edge. Gets rid of all the roughness and shatters on it. Or just clean it with your razor. Screws. Good way to mark your stud. You can pencil it, of course, that shows you where the stud is, but I like to always put a couple screws in the stud. This shows me where the stud is. And that tightens up the old sheetrock. If you're center of the stud, you can also put some in the middle, no big deal. Pieces of wood, backing. You can do backing like I said. We can do a piece here, piece there, piece there. I have some 1x1s here, but I'm going to go look in my pickup truck, work truck, to see if I have any bigger blocks of backing, maybe some 2x4s or something. So let me go try to find some bigger blocking. If I don't have it, then I'm going to have to use these instead. But let's go get some bigger pieces of wood to get some blocking next to this loose box, remodel box. Alright, so pieces of wood. Looks like I have some 1x4s here. See if we can get something in there. That way I can try to tighten up this remodel box a little bit. Alright, piece there, a piece here from an old job. That would work perfect right there. Look at that, full length. Keep the box tight. Always get a few screws in your backing, tighten it up. Every 4 inches or so I like to get a screw set. Alright, now that remodel box. Flange. Now that flange will really, I'm going to push it in, so when I get the sheetrock in there, I'm going to set that flange. No, not to kick this piece of wood down just a 1/2 inch, so that flange will catch the sheetrock piece. So kick it down just a little bit so that little tab will come down. This is a remodel can they put in afterwards, so the tabs that you tighten up that Phillips screw will lock onto the sheetrock patch. Alright, so now when we get the sheetrock in there, we'll tighten that up, and then that flange will be behind the patch. So go ahead and tighten that up just to get it out of the way for now. Sheetrock piece, you can measure it. I have a scrap piece from my last job, so I'm just going to line it up here and kind of eye it. Just mark it with a razor, or you can use a pencil. Cut it across. This razor is getting kind of dull, so I might want to switch the razor. I like these knives because they have a little screw here. These razors don't last a long time. They're not like they used to be, so you got to switch them out. I would say every job you do, put a nice sharp new razor blade to help clean cuts on your sheetrock. So I have the box here, so I'm going to have to kind of niche it. Niche it here. Niche it there. And kind of cut it out. If you want to be precise, you can measure everything and cut it out, but I know I'm going to have to mud and tape all the gaps here, so let's try to just get this to fit in pretty decent for now, and then we can cut it back to size. Cut it here, cut it there. Just freehand. If you have a steady hand, you'll make pretty good cuts. Sheetrock like that, you just snap it once you score it pretty deep. Cut the back side. We're basically making a new puzzle piece here since they didn't cut back any parts you need to with the razor. Since you get a nice sharp razor, it'll be easy to whittle it down. I'm whittling down a puzzle piece. Nice and tight, look at that. It's okay if you have a small gap there. You can kick it over if you want. Go ahead and get a few screws in there. You're going to start on your original stud, that's your strongest stud. So put a few screws in there, tighten it up, top, bottom, and just go ahead and put a screw every 4 inches or so. Rule of thumb for me. Nice symmetrical layout, nice and tight. Now you can use your backing you put in. Nice and tight, nice and tight. Now down here on this backing, see how it sucked it up? When you have the backing there, now the patch is flush. You don't have a big old deep sheetrock patch. You don't want a big old deep patch in the wall. You want it flush with the original wall. You don't want to create a big deep mud patch. Remember that flange I told you about? So now we're going to kick that screw in. Tighten it up. Now that box is nice and strong with that remodel tab there. So that's what we wanted. Go ahead and throw a few more screws in. It won't hurt. Make sure your patch is nice and tight. A little extra screw around this box since they're always pushing on this area, turning on and off the light. So we'll make sure that area is nice and strong. 20 screws, bottom. That's more than enough screws. So it's pretty much patched in. You know, if you want to, when you go to mix your mud, you can go ahead and even pre-fill that gap. So that's what I might do. I might just pre-fill it with hot mud, and then while the mud's still wet, I'm gonna fiberglass over it. But next step, I'm gonna just go get some mud. If you're a newbie on drywall, you're gonna want to use a joint compound. Joint compounds have to dry overnight. So no big deal if you have time to dry overnight. I use quick set hot mud. It dries in 5 minutes. So I'm going to use a 5-minute mud. I'm going to strike in this area to pre-fill the patch gaps, no big deal. And then I'm going to fiberglass mesh tape. I'm going to go ahead and get all my tools out of here. I'm not hanging no more, so I'm going to get all my hanging tools out of the way. It's already a tight cluster area, so all my tools out of the way. Any screws that you dropped, just go ahead and keep them. No need to waste materials. It is metal. So let's go ahead and get all of our tools out of here and go ahead and mix our first coat mud. That's a nice looking patch. Don't mind gaps, no big deal. We're going to go pre-fill those right now. So let's go ahead and mix up some hot mud. Alright, hanging tool bucket out of here. Don't need that anymore. Fresh water. Always use fresh water in your jobs. I already got a bucket of fresh water, a sponge. I'm using a 5-minute mud. I'm going to mix it in a pan. Coating knife. I'm just using a 12-inch knife, a 6-inch knife. These are your go-to tools. You either need a 6-inch. You always need a 6-inch knife. That's your go-to tool for everything in drywall. Coating knife, either use a 10 or 12. You don't need to start buying 20 different knives. These are the only ones I carry on hand. A 12-inch knife is perfect for most coating jobs, and a 6-inch knife. For hot mud, like I said, if you're a beginner drywall, just use a joint compound. With hot muds or more professional grade materials, I don't need a lot of hot muds, so I'm just probably going to do less than a half a pan. Scoop it out. I keep my stuff in a bucket so I don't get water in it. Put the lid back on so no water droplets fall in it. Fresh water. Nice healthy sponge full of water. Fresh water. The reason we use fresh water because sometimes dirty waters will make the mud set up faster. This is a 5-minute mud, so sometimes if you use a dirty mud, it might set up in 2 minutes, or it might not even set up at all. If you put too much water in it, it's okay. Just drip it out, dump it out. If you didn't put enough in, just add a little more. No big deal. Mix it up thoroughly. I'm using my 6-inch knife. Everybody has their own techniques, but this is the easiest way. We're just scooping it up, getting the dry powder on the bottom of the pan. Toss it. You can go that way, but I don't like doing that way because I'm afraid I'm going to slice my hand on the sharp corner here. So it's better just to scoop, scoop, dump, scoop. If you want to get the dry powder on the edges, go ahead and just scrape it. Scrape it. Mix it up thoroughly, get all your corners, no water in there. Nice thick mud. This is a first coat. So now the mud's mixed up. This is the same technique for all hot muds. 5-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, 90-minute. Like I said, if you don't work with muds a lot, just go ahead and use a joint compound. With joint compounds, if you make a mistake, the next day you can sand it away. Get your coating knife, your 6-inch knife, and let's go ahead and go inside and get this patch filled in the gaps, fiberglass, and then we're going to do a nice heavy first coat mud of this 5-minute mud on it. So let's go get that patch. Before we do anything, take your 6-inch knife and scrape all the edges. That just gets any boogers. I also like to scrape past my patch where I'm going to be mudding so there's no boogers. Pre-fill. Like I said, you could pre-fill, you could tape over this right away, but I'm going to just pre-fill it. You're just pushing the mud inside the gap. Striking it in, getting that mud pushed inside the gap, pushed in the gap, pushed in the gap. Sometimes you have to do this whenever there's gaps that you don't like. Just go ahead and pre-fill, no big deal. The mud's still wet, so I'm going to turn around my fiberglass mesh tape. I'm going to go ahead and put the tape right over that pre-filled area. The pre-filled mud in there is going to help the tape stick. Push it down. Push it down. That tape's in there good. Nice and pre-filled patch. Around the box here, go all the way down. All your joints. You can't have gaps. You have to tape all your joints. Fiberglass mesh tape is your go-to product. I don't care what anybody says on the internet, this and that. I'm sure there's a lot of better products out there, but I've been doing drywall for 25 years. I've been a licensed drywaller for going on 13 years now, so I have to warranty my jobs. Warranty means not cracking out, so that's why I just use this product. I don't try to experiment with other products. Tape's all pushed down. Push down, push down. See, this wasn't pushed down. If the tape's being stubborn, just go ahead and put a little bit more mud on it. And put your fiberglass right over it. Now it ain't going nowhere. Now you're ready to coat that patch. I'm using a 12-inch knife. Basically going to go over the whole patch area. I'm going to go right to the edge of this corner and just coat this whole area out. I like to get all my mud on the patch, most of my mud in my pan used up before I trowel it down. Detail areas like this sometimes are tough, so you can take your 6-inch knife and feather the edge. I'm feathering the edge, feather the edge. Your first coat doesn't have to be perfect. You're just filling it in. Filling coat. This is a hot mud too, so we're going to turn around and slick this out in about 5 minutes or so. So this is a 5-minute mud. Mud on your overlaps, cut it. That's a good enough first coat for now. All your extra mud, get it out of your pan. If you work with hot muds, once you're done coating, you need to clean your tools. I mixed up a little more than I needed, that's fine. Clean your pans. Next step's clean your pans, either with the sponge and water bucket or the hose. Fiberglass, we're finished with that, so let's get that out. We're going to give this about 5 minutes or so to set up. You'll know when it's set up because it's going to be hard as a rock. And then we're going to slick it out. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and clean up our tools. Got lucky in this job. I got a hose here. So this is the ideal situation. A hose, washout area for your tools. Clean up your tools right away. You don't want these to dry up. You don't want this hot mud setting up on your tools because they'll set up like a cement. So clean your tools right away after you're done coating. Alright, got our tools cleaned up. I know my next step I'm going to need a slick out technique. I always use a 6-inch knife and a wet sponge. We're going to slick out that hot mud once it sets up. While it's drying, I know I'm going to need a spray set up because it's a spray texture. So I'm going to go ahead and get my compressor ready and take it in there and take this in there to make one less trip to the truck. Spray knockdown. This is not a spray knockdown, it's a spray splatter. So basically we're going to have to use a good old-fashioned spray hopper. I know they sell these spray cans and stuff like that. Do not use a spray can ever. Spray cans are gimmick. The tip on this hopper, the hoppers have 3 tips. Most of them have standard of 3 tips. There's a small tip, medium tip, and a large tip. The go-to tip on most textures, splatters, lighter knockdowns is always the middle tip, the medium one. So I always keep the medium one in here because it's that go-to one. Always double check your trigger, make sure it bounces back. If your trigger throttle stays back when you let go, then maybe it's time to replace the O-rings and check your spring by taking this out. But if you keep these clean, they'll last for a long time. Mud. I use joint compounds. I use hot muds only for coating. For texturing, I have a bucket of joint compound here. I have a little bit of water on it, it's capped off, so I'm going to have to mix it up. This is a fresh box of mud I dumped in yesterday for my last job, so we're just going to get it mixed up thoroughly. I use a hand stomper. You can use a mixer, electric mixer, cordless mixer, whatever's easiest for you. I work in the field, so it's easier sometimes for me just to use a hand mixer like this. We call it a potato masher because that's what it is. Nice creamy mud. If your mud is dirty and you have clumps in it, you're going to have to strain your mud. A strainer, I use like a basic spaghetti type metal strainer like that, a mesh strainer, and you'd strain your mud right into the hopper. But this is a brand new bucket of mud, clean mud. Consistency, I would say it's like a real heavy pancake batter. It's creamy, heavy texture. You don't want a real thin texture. The only time you do like a really thin, watery down texture if you're doing a real light orange peel. But this is kind of like a heavy orange peel splatter type texture. I don't need the texture right away, it's mixed up, so I'm going to just keep the lid on it. I don't want the top getting dried because it's real sunny out, warm day. So like I said, our next step, since we got that all mixed up, our hot mud should be pretty much set up. We didn't waste no time here, so we got our compressor ready, we got our mud mixed up, so our next step is to go inside and slick it out. We're going to take the hopper, leave the hopper out. I'm going to just scoop up the mud I need, but I'm going to bring my air compressor inside since it's the heavy stuff make the most out of this trip. I try to always have both my hands full when I go inside a job and both hands full when I leave the job to make less trips back and forth to the truck. So let's go ahead and get this hopper. Alright, we got the presser in here. Double check the work. It's setting up. This is hot mud. You can see when this stuff sets up, remember that big glob of mud? Look at it now, it's just a big rock. It's not fully dry, it's time to work with it. We got to slick it out. Remember I said slicking out? I take that sponge, the wet sponge, I'm going to get rid of that edge. They call it feathering your edge. Feather your edges first. You want to work it really good. Feather that edge. Feather your edges. That blends it in, so it's a nice transition. You don't see a sharp mud line. The rest of it, I like to go over it with the wet sponge. Take your clean, straight 6-inch, and basically you can go the opposite direction. I'm pushing down fairly hard. I'm taking off that extra mud. I'm paying a little more extra tension around the seams. I'm getting that mud pushed inside any gaps. All that extra mud is going over everything. It's almost turning like another second coat when I'm doing this step. Any rough areas? The only thing I don't like about fiberglass tape, this is the only downfall. Sometimes you get these little stringies. Just pull those out. They'll get in your way. Go every which direction. You're just taking off that extra mud. I put plenty of material on there, so I'm taking off the extra. I'm pushing it down. This first coat here is almost as good as the second coat because I slicked it out really well. This hot mud wasn't fully set up. It was a 5-minute mud. I caught it in about 4 minutes. And you want to catch it before it fully sets so you can work with it. You can sponge away, slick out technique like I'm doing here. This is done with all hot muds. That patch is almost good enough. I can texture it right now. But I'm going to go ahead and mix another thin pan, a second coat mud, and I'm going to go over it and do a tight second coat over this just to fill in any chatters, and I'll probably coat it the other way I went with the first coat. So let's go ahead and just mix another little pan. Let's get this thing all plugged in too so we can get it full of air and it's ready to rock and roll when we're ready to texture. Plug it in, get some let that fill up with air. Alright, clean your sponge, clean your 6-inch knife. We don't need our stomper anymore, so just go ahead and clean it up. I like to clean up everything in the bucket, and then I might just dump the bucket when I'm done, get some fresh water for the next job, get the tools out of the way. I don't need much for the second coat because I slicked it out really good. So I'm only going to need a little bit of hot mud. I'm just going to do just a little bit. Done with the hot mud, so get that bucket out of the way. I don't need much water here. I'll just do a half a sponge. Mix it up. Mix it up. This is a hot mud mix-up. Of course, like I said, if you're not good with mudding, you never mudded before, just use a joint compound. Joint compound, you'll just have to let it dry overnight, turn around and second coat, let that dry, turn around and do a third coat if need be. My work, I mud every day, so I can do most of my jobs with only 2 coats. If you never mudded before, you're probably going to need 3 coats, maybe even 4. Coating, that doesn't mean just put the mud on real heavy. Sometimes it's easier to do tighter coats, thinner coats than a real heavy coat. It's easier to add more than it is to take off. This is a little thinner, but I want to just put a little more water. I want it a little thinner than my first coat. This is basically just going to be a skim coat over my first coat to fill in any imperfections to make the patch perfect. Mixed up really good. coating knife. I'm using my 12-inch knife again. Ready to go. Let's go in there and do a second coat, a tight second. This thing's set up like a rock now. Get that rock out of here. Second coat, we're just going to go fill it in. Fill it in. I'm going opposite direction of my first coat. I like to just get all my mud on. I like to go a little past the first coat. Pull it tight. Pull it tight. Pull it tight. If there's any deep areas you want to leave a little heavier, that's fine. Just like that. Any detail areas, if you're not comfortable getting it around with your bigger coat knife, just use your 6-inch knife. You have more control with this little knife than you do with the bigger knife. So around detail edges, you can always use your 6, no big deal. This has a corner bead here, so I'm going to clean off the corner bead. See, I didn't use much mud at all. So more wasted mud, no problem, but it's a nice second coat. Same thing here, we're going to let the second coat dry, set up, and then I'm going to slick it out again. Another slick out process in between the coats. Slick it out, and then I'll be ready for texture. My air compressor is hooked up. Got my hose. I'm going to hook up my hose basically so when I come in here, I'm going to come in here with the hopper, get everything slicked out, and then turn around and spray texture right over it. Hose is hooked up. Air compressor is full of air. Let's go ahead and wash up our tools. Let that set up. And then we're going to do the spray splatter texture. More likely we're going to spray splatter the area. Also, if your masking gets kicked up, you might have to go re-tack your masking down. Double check your masking before you do start spraying. But let's let this dry, and while that's drying, let's go clean up our pans and knives. Anything we're done using, go ahead and put it away and set up ourselves for the texture process. Yeah, like Jubs, when I do have this washout area, I prefer to wash up on grass if possible, so at least the water doesn't get wasted. The mud has gypsum in it, which, believe it or not, gypsum is good for grass. But you still want to wash away your wash up area, dilute it down. Wash up your tools, most important part after coating. You don't want this stuff caking up, drying on your tools. Then it's fun to get off. You're going to have to chisel it out and waste a lot of time. Tools are clean. Go ahead, let's put them away. I don't need my pan and knife no more. All I need is my 6-inch knife. So let's go ahead and put this tools away. I don't need the pan no more. All I need is a 6-inch knife. Don't need the hot muds no more. Nice damp sponge, 6-inch knife. We're gonna slick it out. Hopper, I'm gonna go ahead. If your hopper has a bunch of dirt and debris in it, you might want to rinse it out before you use it, especially if you had them stored a long time. Some guys also spray WD-40 or oil inside of them, so you want to clean out all debris, dust, dirt out of them before you put mud in it. So let's go ahead and just spray this out. Since it was sitting in the back of my truck, there's a bunch of little leaves and dirt inside of it. So storing your hopper, keeping it well oiled while you're not using it is the best thing you could do. Just a quick rinse out. But you want to make sure you get all that water out. You don't want a bunch of water inside your mud. It's going to thin down your texture, so make sure you get all the water out of there. I just like to put it upside down so majority, if not all, the mud water will drop out. Well, that's all the water's out of the hopper, so I want to make sure this is tight. Like I said about all the tip sizes, this is the medium sized tip here. This is your go-to for most, if not all, textures, spray textures. Knockdowns, splatters, heavy orange peels. The only time you'd use a small tip is like a light orange peel, really light splatter. The only time you'd use the big tip is like a heavy splatter, heavy knockdown, or popcorn texture. So majority of the textures is always a middle tip, at least for this type of hopper. This is a wallboard spray mantis. I don't even know if they make these anymore. This is the one I like. The newer ones have all these adjustments here. I just like this one because it has an adjustment I put in here for air regulator, so you can kind of control the pressure, because some textures are lighter and heavier, so I can kind of gauge it here. But middle tip, clean hopper, get all the boogers out of there, any debris, dirt. My mud I mixed earlier, joint compound. I don't need much. Like I said, if your mud is really dirty, has clumps in it, and you didn't mix it up thoroughly, you're going to have to strain it. You're going to have to pour the mud in here in the strainer and strain it through here to get any boogers and clumps on it, because you don't want to spray boogers and clumps on it. I always keep a lid on my bucket. I'm going to keep my bucket out because anything left over here I'm going to dump in and reuse it. So I got my hopper ready, I got my 6-inch ready, I got my wet sponge ready. We're going to go inside, and hopefully this mud is set up for the second coat. We're going to slick it out, and then we're going to follow through with a spray splatter or a heavy orange peel, whatever you want to call it. I just call it a splatter. So let's go ahead and do the next step process. Alright, back inside, put my hopper, get it out of the way, because I'm going to have to slick this out. Double check it. Yeah, it's set up. So your sponge, your 6-inch knife, same thing there. Get rid of that edge. Get rid of that edge. This is a slick out, feathering it out, feathering out that edge. That's the most important part. Then I just go over it lightly with the wet sponge. The mud's not fully dry, it's setting up. Then I'm going to take my 6-inch knife. I like to go the opposite direction of my coat, taking off that extra mud. Around detail, you want to definitely get any gaps, any chunks, get them out of there. If you have to go another direction, that's fine to fill in anything. That extra mud that's on your knife almost is like a fill. You slick out in between 2 coats. It's almost like we did 4 coats of mud now on this. Don't get any better than that. Corner bead here, get that cleaned up. I don't want no goobers of mud. All that extra mud. Now it's ready for texture. Hopper. Air compressor. Make sure the hose is not tangled up. First thing first, you want to plug this in and you want to try to drain some of the air out of the air compressor. You don't want to spray that full blast tank. You want to drain some of the tank until the motor kicks on, so you're not giving it a full blast of full tank air. That's where you adjust it. I didn't use much texture, so I'm going to dump the rest in the mud bucket. Pull the hose. Now you can pull your masking away. Be careful, you don't want your masking to fall in your wet texture. A lot of people would want to try to leave this overnight, but never leave your masking up overnight. You pull it right when you're done texturing. And your boxes, boxes, boxes. This is a joint compound texture, so you will have to let it dry for at least 24 hours or so before you turn around and primer and paint. This is a splatter texture. We never sand splatter textures because they're rounded dots. If you sand a splatter texture, you're going to make it look like a knockdown. So always don't sand splatters, and you don't sand orange peels. I'm going to leave this hook up, get it out of the way. I don't want it to fall in the mud. Any overspray areas, you can take a wet rag and wipe everything down. But that's pretty much it. We're going to go ahead and clean up all this area, and then we'll come back and take a look at this after I pull the masking and get it cleaned up. Your sponge, your hopper, let's get everything out of here. We're done. Let that dry 24 hours or so. Primer and paint. Then you put the face plates back on, but that's a pretty good job. Patching a hole, spray textured that whole area. Make it blend in. Go ahead and clean up your tools. Clean up your hopper right away when you're done. Joint compounds, we never waste joint compounds unless the mud's dirty. Oh, mud in our hopper, we're just going to put it right back in our mud bucket. There's enough mud in here probably to do another patch on the next job. Hot muds, once you mix those up, anything gets wasted, you have to throw away, but with joint compounds, you can pour back in your bucket. It is messy. I like to scrape the sides of my bucket with my 6-inch knife, just keep the sides clean. You could dump water on the bucket, but I'm going to have to do another job after this. So I'm just going to clean the sides really good. And then I'm going to put the lid on it. And it'll be good for the next job. Put the mud away. Now we're going to go clean our hopper out real good. Get some fresh water, clean it all up. And we're going to put away the hopper, put away the compressor, and pretty much that's done for the job. They just got to let it dry overnight, and then they can turn around and primer and paint. This is when you want a nice wash up area. You don't want this mud sitting inside your hopper drying. If you have no choice and you have to go take it somewhere else to wash it, fine. But if you have a washout area hose, go ahead and wash it up right away. Washing up your hopper, you want to make sure you get everything. I like to take this part off. Don't lose it though. Clean your tip out really good. You don't want this mud caking on in there. Get inside this spray nozzle, get your trigger really good. You have to spray and clean these hoppers out really well. Get the hose deep inside there where the mud is. Up inside, all up in it. All up in it. Trigger area, spray that. Some guys like to even spray water down inside the air. Double check everything. If you see mud in there, go ahead, keep rinsing it off, and once you think it's clean, clean it again. Double clean it. Alright, it looks clean, but I'm going to spray it again. Double spray it. One more time, extra credit. Double check your tip. Double spray in here one more time. Why not? Now I'll put it all back together. Don't lose that tip. I always keep it on there. Now I'm going to spray it again. Spray it again. Now I'm going to spray the trigger. Make sure all the mud's off there. Inside all this piston area, make sure that's really clean. Really clean. Spray inside the mechanisms, everything. Make sure this thing is thoroughly cleaned up. Double check it, it's good. I got a nice clean hopper. I also like to spray the outside of it really good. I'm going to fill up my bucket with fresh water for the next job. Any mud from your washout area, just go ahead and wash this mud away. If there's any boogers of mud, just go ahead and pick them up and throw them away. If this is a good washout area, just dilute the area. It ain't going to hurt nothing. It's good for the grass. You just don't want big clumps of mud in people's grass. Fresh water for the next job. Everything's cleaned up. You got mud on your shoes, clean up your shoes. Keep everything clean. This is a time to clean, clean, clean. Everything must be cleaned. Double check your hopper again. There's more. But that's pretty much it. Everything's cleaned up. Your hopper's clean. Sometimes I like to let the hopper dry out a little bit, and if I know I'm not going to use it for a while, I'm going to spray it down with a lubricant like a WD-40 or some kind of oil. And then before I use it again, I'll do the same thing. I'll rinse it all out, and then it'll be ready for the next job. I've had these hoppers, they last decades if you keep them clean. Once in a while, you'll have to just redo the piston in it with new O-rings, but keep everything clean. They'll last a long, long time. That's pretty much it, guys. We got that patch all done. Everything's cleaned up. Put all my tools away. Everything is good to go. Nice clean hopper. These hoppers, they're very expensive. At least to me, you're paying $70, $80 for a decent hopper. One like this, I want it to last forever because I don't want to have to buy a new one. I keep my hopper under the truck. Toolbox as good as I get. And then that's pretty much it, guys. If you haven't liked this video, I would really like it if you send me a like, comment, whatever you want to do. This video is here made for you guys to help you out. I know how to do drywall, so I'm looking for here is just you guys watch my videos, give me a like, watch a couple commercials. Hopefully I make 55 cents off you watching this video. So it's worth your time, worth my time. Basic patching, drywall repair, patching, a 1 foot by 2 foot repair with a spray splatter or heavy spray orange peel. Hey, thanks for viewing.